Welcome back to our Global Business Report. Boeing's attempts to get the 737 MAX back in the air have suffered a further setback after test pilots found a new potential flaw with the aircraft involved in two recent fatal accidents. Test pilots for the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, who have been examining a Boeing software fix for the anti-stall system implicated in the crashes last week, found a new potential problem, according to people briefed on the situation. Now, the FAA has told Boeing to correct the problem before it subjects the aircraft to a pre-certification flight, a formal test run that would allow the plane to be cleared to fly passengers again. Now to Nigeria, where more than 34 million bank accounts across the country are yet to be linked to bank verification numbers. According to reports from Nigerian Interbank Settlement Systems, that's the NIBSS, only 758,000 bank accounts were linked within the last 2 months. This brings the total number of linked accounts to over 38 million. Now on this story, CEO Alpha African Advisory, Sanyade Okoli, joins me in the studio. It's good to have you and good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
All right. You just corrected the statement there. 34.7 million accounts not linked to BVN. That's a lot. What are the implications nationwide?
I think we need to step back. You've just said 38 million have been linked.
Okay.
But it's just that in the same process, because you have about 122 million accounts in total, but roughly about 72 million are actually active accounts. I think what is interesting is that given with the institution of BVNs and lots of deadlines, extended deadlines for people to register, and the penalty for non-registration after these, the expiration of the deadline, was that you shouldn't be able to operate the accounts. So I just thought it was interesting that you had about 72 million active accounts, but yet only 38 million linked to BVNs. So of the 34 or so million that aren't linked to BVN, how can they still be active? Because the deadline expired quite a while ago. So I'd have expected those accounts to be dormant. So in terms of implication, to my mind, it means that we're probably not penalizing, shall we say, or coming down on those who have not enforcing the whole BVN thing.
Be that as it may, do you think a lack of awareness on the part of account holders, themselves could, have be an issue here as well? And are the banks proactive in that scenario?
I would be surprised if it's lack of awareness, because I'm sure if you reflect back around 2015, 2016, there was a lot of noise about the whole BVN verification, and you couldn't go to an ATM, you couldn't go to a bank without seeing a sign on BVNs. Well, you could say that they should have continued with that education about BVNs, but I would say actually, we all know that what gets monitored gets done.
Indeed.
So if people have been able to operate their accounts without BVNs, then why bother getting a BVN?
Very good question. Now, what are the immediate benefits of getting accounts linked to BVN so far? And are we plugging the leaks regarding fraud, all those leaks, as it were?
So let's look at benefits. If we're talking about the account holder, be it the individual and corporate. So for corporates, what the rule that came out was that the banks required the BVNs of the directors and signatories, etc. So for the account holders, the benefit is obviously that you should be able to continue to operate your account, and the fact that, as I said before, that without your account being linked to BVNs, your account was supposed to have been suspended. That's obviously the theory, but as we can see, in all likelihood, seems not to have been what's been going on in practice. But then from the bank and I guess general government standpoint, it's, with the BVN, let's step back and explain it. Basically individuals are supposed to go into banks and get essentially their fingerprints taken and a photo of their face taken. And it's biometric verification number. So that's supposed to stop where in the past, you and I could go into a bank and open up accounts in 5 different names and take loans out in 5 different names. You can no longer do that because the BVN applies, each individual is supposed to have one BVN. So I could have 10 different accounts in 10 different banks and it's the same BVN. So it's supposed to have curbed fraud and money laundering, et cetera, et cetera.
Which is, well, it's been sustained as of now. Now, do you think BVN is a useful tool in aiding government's single treasury account initiative to curb corruption here? That's also part of this
well, if we look at the single treasury account, that really is about all governments, you know, the ministries, departments and agencies.
Indeed.
All them.
There are individuals operating those agencies as well.
Yeah, no, indeed. So I'm just thinking through your question.
Yeah.
So all their monies are supposed to go into one single, you know, single account, and that really was to stop the issue where, I guess, individual departments or agencies will hold on to the money, and related to that, maybe those government workers benefiting from holding monies in different accounts. Honestly, I'm struggling to see the immediate link because the Treasury Single Account just takes away all of that, regardless of who those individuals are.
Although there were opposition in some quarters to that single Treasury account issue.
Well, it drained a lot of liquidity from the system.
Yeah.
But I think we've all adjusted to that new norm.
Okay, so on the long term, it's beneficial.
The BVN?
No, the BVN and of course the single treasury.
I'll speak about the BVN.
All right.
The Treasury Single Account, that's definitely still up for discussion.
All right. Okay, so what can be done to sustain the BVN registration on account of its benefits, as it were?
I think it really is based on what you were saying before, continued education. So I no longer go to ATMs or banks and see, you know, these very visible signs. So continuing to ring it in our minds that those who haven't been registered for BVNs should. But I think also if you suspended those accounts, and you know, what I always find curious about Nigerian banks is when your account is suspended or dormant, they're always happy to receive the credit. So they take the money, it's just that you can't get it out.
Indeed.
So, you know, if those accounts are suspended, then, you know, there's no question that people will rush out to get their BVNs done.
Very good. Now, if we take a look at it, also total accounts of bank accounts in Nigeria is around 122.071 million as at May 2019. What does that tell you about efforts towards financial inclusion here?
Well, obviously the financial inclusion number has been creeping up. It's still shy of what the central bank would like. And to be honest, I can't remember the numbers, but I know they just came out with a new target they're aiming for. I think they had a 2020 target. It's now 2022 or something, but I don't have the specific numbers. But then having said that, of that 122, about 40% of those accounts are dormant. And if we just work back and say on average, each, you know, individual who has an account probably has, say, you know, 1.5, 2 accounts. You can still see that, you know, there's a way to go with the financial inclusion because when you're looking at financial inclusion, you're talking about those in the formal system, but then also the not so, there's a term for it, the not so formal system. And one thing I should say about the dormant accounts, less prevalent now, but we all know, you know, a few years ago when banks used to go on these marketing drives. And the bank employees were encouraged to go out there and sign up and get more customers.
I think they still have a subtle, you know, preference for that as
well. But, you know, before there was like really heavy marketing. And what would happen is, you know, some people, you know, maybe trying to do a friend a favor might open the account, but if they're already happily operating an account with a particular bank, they're not moving their services. So they've merely opened an account just to satisfy some moral or social obligation, but they're not going to operate it. Thus, you would have 40% of bank accounts being dormant.
The dormancy, you know, what implication is it having on the financial system as a whole? You know, you have, like you just indicated, like 40% not being active, and you just have them there, registered.
Yeah, well, it would depend on quite how much you have in those accounts, because we also know that, yes, you'd have, certainly I'll be the first to put my hand up to say, I'm quite certain that I have accounts in different places that are dormant that I open and probably never even put money in, just because a friend asked me to.
Indeed.
But then on the other hand, you would have people maybe who've passed away, etc., who would have money sitting in these accounts. So which is a great buffer or float for banks, you've got to admit.
All right, very good. But do you think the BVN itself is a fail-proof plan or process, as it were, to, curbing all the leakages, as we've mentioned in the past? Can people actually go around it?
Well, you and I know that nothing is ever fail-proof, because once you put one system in place, clever people think of ways to go around.
Be one step ahead.
Exactly. So I'm sure there are people sitting there who would have already gotten ideas of ways to go around, and two, those who are currently thinking of ways to go around. But we keep evolving. I think it's a great step in the right direction. In the right direction, indeed. But why did it take us this long to adopt this process? Other countries have a way of centralizing all these figures together, and Nigeria, the BVN thing hasn't been far too long. I think it was about 2014, 2015. Well, we've got to remember that in terms of technology, you've got to look at the overall adoption of technology for the nation. So, for example, ATMs, that really, the use of ATMs, POSs, etc., that really made some headway when the previous central bank governor made this move against, essentially, move towards cashless banking. But then you'd say that there were other parts of Africa who 20, 30 years ago were using ATMs as a matter of course. I think it really is just a function of the overall technology adoption. You've got to look at, basic things, but also the supporting infrastructure and mindset. But again, a step in the right direction. All right. Statistically, do you think it's also beneficial in terms of knowing the census of those who are bankable, those who are bank accounts, and those who are yet to be banked, as it were, with the BVN? Sorry, repeat that question. Yeah, statistically, does it aid, you have a census of those who are actually banked, unbanked, and of course, those who are yet to be banked? Yes and no, because I think part of the challenge we're having as a nation is lots of disparate databases. Okay. So you've got the BVN. Yes. You've got the, they've been trying to do this national identity card. You've got the voter register. You've got driving license registers. So you have all these different registers, and I think until there's the attempt to create one holistic database, we're not going to readily be able to identify the gaps you're talking about. All right.